Hi everybody and welcome back to the drum kit tutorial. If you've been following along, in the last episode we created all our drums and our cymbals, and we're at a position now where we can start to connect these all together. So today we're going to create a couple of stands for the cymbals, the hi-hat and the floor tom and the snare. So let's get started. If you've been following along, you will have got to this stage. If not, I will upload a copy of the file at this stage and you can follow along with this tutorial. We need to now apply all our modifiers. So all these grips have all got modifiers to them, the rims have got a modifier to them. We no longer need that. What we want is one object, which is our bass drum, and to do that we need to apply our modifiers. So this little spanner here indicates that there's modifiers on this mesh, and we want to apply those. So when we apply our modifiers, we apply from the top down, and that's just due to the way Blender works. You need to apply the top modifier first and then you will get the result that you're expecting. So just going to click into each of these and apply the modifiers. Once we've done that, we then can join these objects together. So let me just turn my screencast keys on so you can see what I'm doing. And to do that, I'm just going to shift click and click on this little orange triangle, and that will join all these together. So press Ctrl J, and that joins your selected objects into one mesh, and we can now call that bass drum. So you can see before we had 3 objects with modifiers, now we've just got one object with no modifiers applied, and it's ready to be exported into Unity. So we just need to do that for all these objects. So let me just expand these down and I'll quickly go down. So just bear with me while I apply all these modifiers. And I often find it's quicker to just apply. If you're doing one job like this where you've got to do it a few times, it's quicker just to go through, apply them all, as opposed to doing each object one at a time, which you obviously could do. And when I say one at a time, I mean apply the modifiers, merge them together, rename them, etc, etc. This way we've applied all the modifiers, we're ready to join them and rename all in one go. So now we can rename this floor tom. Shift click, join these together. This is rack tom large. And I'm naming these because we're going to export them into Unity, and we want them to bring in the correct name and just keep a bit of control over each of the objects. It starts to get confusing once you get a few objects and you've not named them properly. You'll see if you've watched any of my other videos, I don't always follow that rule, but I do try to do it where possible. So we are now ready. Have we got any modifiers on our cymbal and hi-hat? Nope, so we're ready. So let's start with our bass drum. Let me just hide all these away. So we've only got our bass drum visible. And the bass drum will be rotated, so we want it to be rotated towards us. So let's change this. It's because we've got a 45 degrees, so let me just zero that off, and let's change this to 90 degree. And now you can see the bass drum is facing forward. The other thing we want to do is lift this off the floor because we don't want it to be in the floor. When we export all this stuff, this line here, this 0 line, is going to be the floor inside Unity. So we've raised that just off the floor just a little bit, and I'm not happy with the positioning of these grips there and there. So it feels wrong. It feels like they should be here and here. So we can just rotate this drum on the y-axis until we're happy with the positioning. I'm just going to eyeball this, and that looks much better. And we are finished with the bass drum. So let's hide that away and bring it in let's do the snare drum. I've done a few measurements and a few testings. I don't actually own a drum kit, so I couldn't measure these, but I've looked on a few videos to try get the height of the snare right, and it seems to be down to individuals. You can set it at any height you want, but we're going to set ours to 0.5. and that should be roughly about right. We will be able to adjust these inside Unity once we export, but just for modelling this stand I want to at least have a height that is roughly correct. So I'm just going to put this as a 0.5, which you can do the same if you want. And we need to create a stand for these. So I have been looking at a lot of stands. So if I bring in, not that video, that's the wrong one, I bring in this, you can see they've all got like rubber grips on the side and a pole of some description up the middle and stand down at the bottom. Now they're all quite complex models and we don't really have time to do each of these individual ones. If that's what you want to do, then go ahead and do that, but it could take quite a long time, so we're just going to do a more simple stand. We'll create a couple of rubber grips up here into the middle and then down, and we'll just duplicate that object. So let's get started on that. Let's create a, let's use a cube, and I'm just going to press S to scale that down until I'm roughly happy with it. Full stop to zoom in, and I'm just going to make these a bit thinner. So let's just jump into edit mode with tab, and we can eyeball most of this until we're sort of happy with what we've got, and I think that looks about right. It will fit in there. It's possibly a bit big, but we can adjust that. So let's move this up and have a look. So yeah, I think that's a little bit big, so let's adjust this now. And there we go, that's going to be our rubber grip that's holding onto the drum. And next we need to create a few poles. So to do that, I'm going to do this in edit mode, so it's the same object. I've selected the 3D cursor and I'm just going to click that roughly in the middle. Now that will tell Blender that that's where you want to start or add your next object. So if I press Shift and A, this is always in the way, press Shift and A, and we'll add in a cylinder, and this is going to be our tube. Let me expand this out. We definitely don't need that, so we're going to drop this to 8 vertices, 0.01. It's probably a bit big. Let's go 0.005. Looks fine, and we'll be adjusting this around, but I'll set it to 30 centimeters. And let's rotate that object now. So just selecting rotation, and I'm just going to drop this in. I'm just going to eyeball roughly the sort of positioning that I want. That looks fine. And let's adjust these ends now. So I'm just going to press double tap G, and that will move this face down the mesh. If you just press G, you can move it anywhere you want. Double tap G sort of locks it in the same orientation as your object. I'm just going to delete the face because it's hidden away, we don't need it, and this face. So let's just look at this in front view, and we want these to meet roughly in the middle. So I'm just going to grab these, move these up, and I think that looks about right. And then I'm just going to just rotate this face just to be flat. That looks fine. And if you followed in the last video, you will see we used a central rotation point for creating multiple grips while staying on the same position, and we're going to do exactly the same with our rubber grips here. So if you remember, we need to set our orientation point to 0, 0, 0. So let's move our 3D cursor back to 0, press space and search for set origin, and to the 3D cursor, and that will mean now when we adjust our rotation, it rotates around that central point and around our drum. Now we're going to want 3 of these, so let's adding a array modifier. Again, watch, if you want this in a bit more detail, watch the last video and we go over this a few times. But we essentially setting our rotation points, and we're using this object offset to determine where that rotation point is, and we created a rotation point at 0, 0, 0. Let's jump into top view. Don't know what that is. That's because that's one of the objects, so that's because we haven't applied our rotation and scale to this object. So just press Ctrl A, rotation and scale, and that will move all those objects into the right place. Now when we adjust this rotation, you'll see these other 2 arms move around from this array, and we want these at 120 degrees. and that's created us 3 nice grips. Excellent. Now to hide this away, we could just make a big cylinder, but that might look a bit large, so I'm just going to add in a square. So let's add in a cube scale, and I'm just going to again eyeball this, and this is really just going to hide away where those objects are all connecting. I'm just going to make this into more of a rectangle, and there we go, we've sort of hidden that away in what could be described as some kind of stand mechanic, I guess. And let's add in our support, I'm not entirely sure what you call it, but let's add it in a cylinder. I'm going to keep this same dimension, and I'm just going to move this up. That looks fine. And to create the feet, I'm just going to duplicate this object here. You could probably spend a bit more time, change these to cylinders and make them look a bit more feet-like, but I think for our purposes we can just duplicate this. Now before I duplicate, because I'm going to be moving this down, I'm just going to apply these modifiers. So let's take this cube, actually let's create a new collection and call this stand. Just because we're going to use this again, let's move the cube in, this central cube and this cylinder. Now they are all inside this stand object, and we can duplicate that. So let's take this. I'm just going to press shift and duplicate, that creates me a new one. And go floor stand and apply this modifier. Then I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees, so it's the other way around, and just move it onto the floor. So let's I'm just going to eyeball this onto the floor here, and I'm going to duplicate this and put that there, and that will hide away that. Now you can see we've got some sort of stand there. It's not amazing, but it's perfect for our purposes. Let's make sure we've got some materials applied to these before we do anything else, and I'm happy with that positioning. Let's create 2 materials. The base material we'll have as chrome, and then we need a rubber material for these end pieces. So just hovering your cursor over the object and press L will select all the links. So that's selected that cube that we had before, and let's create a new material called rubber. And let's just give it a black colour, and I'll just turn the roughness up. Make sure we press assign on there, and that will assign that material to those faces. And let's do the same on all of these. So this needs the chrome material. And select our feet, L for linked, add in a new material, select our rubber and assign that material to those faces. Let's have a quick look at that. There's something definitely going strange there. Let's apply smooth shading to these objects. That's much better. So that's our stand for our snare drum, so let's call that snare drum stand. And we need another one of those for our floor tom. So let's duplicate that collection and call it floor tom stand. And obviously our floor tom is going to be a little bit lower. Again, let's adjust this to 0.5. Oops, I need to make sure I've selected the floor tom. And this might be a little bit high, but we can adjust this again inside Unity. Let me just hide that away. Let's take this object and move it down. Now you can see when we try to move it down, it's moving the rotation point, so we need to do this in edit mode. Let's move this down. Let's bring our floor tom back in so we can actually see it. And we need to move this out so that it's in line with the outside. Looks fine, and we need to take this central piece here. Let me just get the, just inside here should be our, there we go. Just move this down. And we can take this this edge loop here and just place that inside, and that will hide that away, and I think we'll call that done. We could actually bring this, let's just bring this down out of there. And I think that looks good. So that's our floor tom stand. And what should we do next? The rat toms don't need anything. The cymbal and the hi-hat is going to need a stand. So the cymbal I'm going to set to 0.75 meters. Again, we can adjust this inside inside Unity, and we'll use this floor part of this stand here, but not the top bit. So let's duplicate this collection and call this cymbal stand. And let's just remove these so we don't need, oh, make sure I'm doing the right one. We don't need this, and we don't need that. And what we need to do is just adjust this. So let's move that up there until we're happy with where it's positioned. Pressing the wrong key there. And let's just grab this face and move it down. And that's very simply our stand there. We probably want some kind of rubber piece on here that just holds the top on, so let's just add in let's use a cylinder. Let's make this a little bit wider, 0.02, and maybe 1 centimetre high. Let's go with 2 centimetres. That looks fine, and apply the rubber material to that. Looks slightly off centre, so I just wanted to check. Okay, so that I've spelt cymbal with an S. That's great. So that's our cymbal stand, and we'll duplicate this collection for our hi-hat stand. Let's hide that away. Let's hide our cymbals. Let's bring in our hi-hat, and for the hi-hat we want this a little bit lower, so let's set this to 0.5, and let's just adjust these so they're in the right place. This one, let's take this face here, move this down. I think this is not quite zeroed, so let's just zero that off manually. I've actually seen somewhere they have this pole really sticking up high, so it's got probably down to personal preference what you do with these. So shade that smooth, and I think that's done. Now, to get these ready to export into Unity, we probably want to keep this stand object separate, because we want to be able to move this up and down inside Unity in case we need to adjust anything. The same with this rubber piece here. So I think all this really needs to be separate, and the cymbal itself needs to be separate, or the hi-hat in this case. We do need 2 hi-hats, so let's duplicate that and rotate 180 degrees, sorry, and put that into place. I think that looks fine, so let's call that hi-hat bottom. I wonder if these have got different names, these hi-hat tops and bottom. I'm not actually sure. If you're aware, give me a comment and let me know what it's actually called. I'm not a drumming expert. Okay, that is everything complete. We've now built all our drums, our cymbals, our hardware, and we're ready to export all these objects into Unity and finally put our drum kit together. I'm glad you could join me on this episode. Join me in the next one. We'll export everything, create some materials in Unity, and we'll actually have a working drum kit inside there. So like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you shortly. Thank you very much.